Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'll be presenting what could possibly be a not so popular opinion depending on what camp you are in, but I'm going to present some of my arguments as to why Skyrim is a superior RPG over Elden Ring. This is not to bash Elden Ring. I think it's one of the top 10 open world RPGs ever made. I just don't think that it has as much in it, and you could almost say obviously it doesn't have as much in it as Skyrim. Now I'm playing, as you can probably see here, this is 1200 mods, and I don't actually see any reason why anyone will ever play Elden Ring with 1200 mods. It's just not functionally useful to the game. You know, you're not going to have a mod where somebody adds 200 NPCs with fully voiced dialogue that you can barter with and have them follow you around, and then you can have them equip the gear that you want them to have, because it's just not functional to the game. The game wasn't built that way to begin with, so the time that it would take to put that in would take so much time that it'd almost be not worth it. Here's an example of an NPC from an NPC mod that added 200 NPCs to the game with fully voiced dialogue. This is Zora Fairchild.
I'm right here.
And I can ask her anything, she'll have dialogue pertaining to what aspect of the main quest I'm in. She'll have dialogue pertaining to the cities we're in. And it's also interesting how
Alright, I'll carry
I
this
can
for
deck
you.
her out to have her do what I want her to do. Here's a sword that I created through smithing, which you can't do in Elden Ring. You can't create your own swords. Not to say that there isn't some valid options of things you can do with weapons. Obviously, there is quite a bit that you can do with weapons in Elden Ring, but as far as forging my own sword like this, or forging my own armor, that's not something I could really do. But she has all this gear on her. Some of it I crafted, some of it we found in the world. But I basically have her
Alright.
wearing the armor and weaponry that I wanted her to have. If you look at her bracers there, it almost looks like it's out of Witcher. Ebony gauntlets, a dragon priest mask. She's got an amulet on. If we go into my inventory, we'll see a similar type deal where this has 1200 mods on it. So I'm not trying to compare this. This obviously isn't the base game of Skyrim, and I don't really play base Skyrim. I play it this way. And I don't even really play vanilla Elden Ring anymore. I kind of just play it with a randomizer mod, and I use zip glitch to zip around the world and try to find items. But basically, to turn Elden Ring into a game where you have 1200 mods, that's not going to work out very well, because that's basically going to apply to the PC version. Like, there's not going to be console versions that have 1200 mods. So you're going to have probably less than 10% of the player base is going to have that many mods, if it even ever had that many that you could have. Be less than 10% of the player base would have that. It wouldn't apply to, it would affect PvP too negatively, when you could argue PvP is, 25%, give or take, depending on a person's playstyle of the Elden Ring experience. You'd put yourself in a box where you'd just be specified to PvE. But yeah, that as far as followers and NPCs and dialogue, that's just one aspect of why Elden Ring won't really ever have that many mods. Now, if I come up here, these are all perks. My stats are not limited to strength, agility, or strength, dexterity, faith, intelligence, arcane, endurance, mind, vigor. I actually have quite a few more that can all have their own specific perks applied to them. As an example, if we go over to the thieving style of skill set in Skyrim, which involves sneak, lockpicking, pickpocket, speech. Those are the main skills within the thieving of Skyrim. Sneak, you can sneak in Elden Ring, but it's not as good as what Skyrim has. Uh, it's a rather somewhat of an afterthought to sneak around in Elden Ring. Nobody really plays sneak builds. Nobody, you can put Concealing Veil on as a talisman, but for the most part, people aren't going to be doing that. You can't cast spells to make yourself invisible. And when you do become, even if you could become invisible, or even if you are sneaking around in Elden Ring, you're not picking locks. You're not opening anybody's doors or chests. You're not finding secret areas in a dungeon that you couldn't get to unless you picked the lock. So you don't have a reason to do that. You're not trying to avoid guards from having a bounty on you for breaking a door open. Pickpocket, that doesn't happen in Elden Ring. There's not a scenario where you pick anybody's pocket. You go up to an enemy or a friend. It is what it is. You just attack them. It's not like Skyrim where if I walk up to an enemy, I can calm them, I can frenzy them, I can cast fear on them. Well, in my case, with my 1200 mods on Skyrim, if I calm somebody or if I mass calm, no matter who the enemy, if it's an enemy and I have them calmed, I can walk up to them, I can talk to them, I can even I can barter with them. I can have them follow me just through the ability to cast a calm spell on them. That's something that's not pretty much not going to happen in Elden Ring. You're not going to have an enemy where you walk up and calm them and have them follow you or have them barter with you, because bartering and speech is basically non-existent in Elden Ring. I would feel sorry for the million-plus players who didn't watch videos online of Elden Ring to figure out that you're supposed to stand in front of an NPC and talk to him multiple times over and over to actually get the extent of the dialogue out that you need. I mean, that's something that I knew because I looked up videos on the game, but for the most part, people aren't going to know that. As an example of, let's try and think of where I could go to actually show you an example of me casting calm. So view it as though if this were Elden Ring and I came up on a group of enemies. Okay, I can't do what I'm about to do here. I wouldn't have all these followers, and granted, it just makes the game easy. That's not to say, Elden Ring, as I started the video off with, it's one of my top 10 favorite open world RPGs of all time. It has difficulty to it. It's a lot harder than Skyrim. I mean, that's one of the main things going for it. As a Dark Souls game, it's kind of known for that. But if I go up here and I go like this, and then I can just die before I even cast a spell. Here, I'll get it off though. So, I calm this person, and now I can talk to him. I can entice barter with him. This is done through modding, of course, but that's one of the pluses of Skyrim over Elden Ring. You're not going to have a case where somebody's going to mod Elden Ring to the extent that I can calm somebody and entice barter with them, because bartering really has no place in Elden Ring at all. Unless you're on New Game Plus 6 and you have 3 lion great bows and 2, Radon or the Star Sword's great swords, and you want to sell one of the lion great bows, bartering doesn't have much place in Elden Ring. And even if it did, you're selling that great bow for 1,000 runes. Why would you even bother selling items in Elden Ring? It's not even a thing. But here with this person, because I have him calmed, I can buy his dagger off of him, and he won't even have that weapon now. So there, I bought that. I can buy his arrows for his bow. He doesn't have those anymore. So now if I went back and tried to fight him, he wouldn't even have that. And he's running away from that person, so I'll take this person out real quick. Anyway, so let's go back and frenzy this person. See, that's not the only way in Skyrim to actually disarm someone. You can shout weapons out of their hands. There's certain perk strategies where through blocking you could actually disarm a person. You can just pick up their weapon from the ground through that. But now we'll try to frenzy him. And this is gonna do this for all these people, but so he has his bow, but as you can see now, he can't do nothing but run. He tries to take the bow out, but I bought all of his arrows from him, so he didn't have arrows to work with. And they're back at peace. So this is an example of the illusion school. So what I was doing here is I was showing an example of the thief skills in Skyrim and how Elden Ring doesn't have anything like that at all. Sneaking has minor use cases. Lockpicking, non-existent. Pickpocketing, non-existent. Speech, non-existent. What I just gave you there was an example of the illusion school, which those various forms of playstyles are non-existent in Elden Ring. You can't turn yourself invisible. And there are cases here where Elden Ring could even be superior to Skyrim. If you take vanilla Elden Ring versus vanilla Skyrim, Elden Ring has better destruction spells, referring to spells that will lower the HP of your enemies. Yeah, Elden Ring is better at that with incantations and sorceries. That's not a knock on Elden Ring. Not all of these skills across the board are better in Skyrim than they are Elden Ring. Enchanting's better in Skyrim in my opinion, because there's just not enough that you can do in Elden Ring. You can change affinities, you can make stuff scale better with dexterity, like people go for quality or put faith or lightning or have magic damage on a weapon. But there's just much more that you can do with weapons in terms of actually putting affixes onto the weapon. There's more that you can do with it in Skyrim. That's not to say the combat's better. That's not what I'm saying. It isn't. In my opinion, it isn't. But there is more that you can do with base gear in Skyrim. Crafting my own gear. And then I would have, I have all these perk sets. Not to say that one-handed and two-handed is better, it's not, but it has perk trees in it where I can advance my playstyle in a way that doesn't include me just leveling up my strength to make my attack stronger. And there's more to it than that. So anyway, going back to the point where I said that I could sell a lion great bow for 1,000 runes in Elden Ring. You don't have any interest in doing that because the barter system in Elden Ring is relatively non-existent. However, here in Skyrim, I would actually want to sell some gear because I had 90,000 gold, but I bought a house for 50,000 gold. There is no player housing in Elden Ring. I doubt that anybody will have a modded version where they'll put housing in it. If they did, people don't really have a reason to have that housing. You don't have a reason to have player housing in Elden Ring because you just carry all your gear around and it is what it is. It doesn't affect you all that negatively until maybe when you get up to higher New Game Plus levels where you can't pick up certain things, but that's a rare case. So here I am recalling to an example of a player house that I have, and this is with 1200 mods. But I'm saying 10 years down the road, in Elden Ring through modding, are you going to have a player house that's going to have any real functional utility for you? Like what I'm doing here, this is the Skyrim map here. And I can push a button here, I can go to Raven Rock, and you see that it set it there. Then I go through there and it'll transport me to Raven Rock. Is Elden Ring ever going to have a reason to have that? Like, you don't have a reason to put all your gear into a house because it doesn't affect you to just carry all of it around. Now, granted, as you see in the bottom right corner, my carry weight is 643, so I am already have unrealistic amounts of carry capacity.
Is there anything? Very well. Here is what I have access to.
But as far as like getting 4,000 gold, and I don't have anything. I don't really have my dialogue buff to get more gold out of it, but like, if you look at this ebony mace, without me having my speech perks buffed out to get a lot of value, and without me wearing necklaces and rings and enchanted items to increase the sell value of my items, I still get 1,100 gold for this ebony mace. You don't get that for the lion great bow, which is, you know, you got legendary weapons in Elden Ring that get you 1,000 runes when you sell it. And that economy has no usefulness to you because you can't buy a house for 50,000 because you'll never have a reason to buy a house for 50,000. You know, you're not gonna have a mod with 200 followers, 200 NPCs added to the game with thousands of lines of dialogue, because the game's not a game that has dialogue and doesn't really have followers in the first place anyway. They're just never gonna have that. So in Skyrim, I have numerous factions that I can join. Now, in the vanilla game, sure, some of these factions aren't all that impressive. I agree with that. But because you can't join a faction in Elden Ring in the first place, when are you going to have modded improvements to those factions? So see how the base created game of Elden Ring is not really made to be beneficial to the mindset of we can expound on the game, because the modders will have to program stuff. They'll have to incorporate stuff from the ground up. Like, to put a follower into Elden Ring where you can go over and talk to them and change their equipment by trading. This was something that was put into the base vanilla game of Skyrim. Modders didn't have to go out of their way to make this happen. So I have Daedric armor with Mirax sword because I'm able to do that for her.
I've been looking for you. Got something I'm supposed
Here
to do.
a courier comes to drop something off to me.
Looks like that's it.
That would never happen in Elden Ring. Not that you'd necessarily want it to. But let's see what they got dropped off here regarding the Dark One. Bum 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 bum. As a peddler or traveling merchant, if you will, I hear and see many things about the Dark One. So I'll never get a letter dropped off to me like that in Elden Ring. That's just not gonna happen. Anyway, where was I? Oh, we were on factions. So, and I know that's 1,200 mods. I'm not saying you can't eventually do things like this in Elden Ring. But this is the College of Winterhold, which was notorious in Skyrim for not having much to it. But with 1,200 mods, it has quite a bit more to it. And it was actually very enjoyable to play through it after it was improved. And you see how it's quite a bit different. I even have a person over here that has...
I still need some help, if you can spare the time. You've done well. Thank you. Here, this is for you.
And so, if you notice up on the left corner there, it said Brelna Marion. is now my friend. Well, if she were to die, I would get an inheritance from her. And the trick to that is I can do that with almost anything in this world. Through my illusion abilities, I have the ability to be friends with even enemies, even enemy vampires, enemy automatons. And there's actually, you can see posts of people getting inheritance from ash spawns because they were able to raise the infinity, sorry, of the ash spawn to the extent that
another few decades without a disaster.
it actually
That would
gave
be
him,
nice.
gave the player, the courier was sent to the player to give him a note that said that they have received an inheritance from an ash spawn, and the inheritance was 300 gold. Well, I can't go use illusion to trick a misbegotten into thinking that it's my, friend, and then when it dies, I inherit a misbegotten shortbow or something silly like that. That doesn't happen, but this is an example of, when I played through this, it was completely different. But you can't join, are you going to join the Flame Monks? Are you going to join, and if you did, would these be people that you would talk to? There's just too much, there's too many gaps. This was all in vanilla Skyrim too, that you could join these things. Here I am swimming. I can't do that in Elden Ring. The Tarnish is rather limited in what he can do. He can't swim. He can't buy a house. Not to say that he's not better with combat. Of course he is. But it kind of limits what you can and can't do with the game when, this whole area was programmed to have stuff underwater. It's not a lifeless world. Modders can put things under the ocean in Skyrim if they want, because the player can swim. Now, if we go here to, let's say I conjure, and this isn't to say that Ashes of War aren't cool or don't have their place. My point in doing that was my Magicka bar being, in what in Elden Ring would be FP. I have my Magicka bar here. Well, I don't have to just drink a flask to fill that Magicka bar. And I'm not talking about the natural regeneration of it. I'm saying I have the option of spell absorption, to where if I didn't generate any FP or any Magicka, somebody can cast a spell at me, and instead of getting damaged by it, I can just absorb that into my Magicka pool. I can't absorb spells into my FP pool. There is no form of spell absorption. Now, if we, let's take it a little bit of a step further here. This is me morphing into an Ayleid Lich. And as you see, I've conjured 3 of them there, so I have like an Ayleid Lich army here with me with my 3 minionized, or summoned. As you see, it says Braelin's Ayleid Lich. I can even talk to this and trade with it. That's accomplished through mods. But you see how cool I look. But this was in vanilla Skyrim, not the Ayleid. This was modded in. But you could be a werewolf, you could be a vampire lord, and these had perk trees to them. You could do certain things with being a vampire lord, with being a werewolf. You could deck it out to fit your play style. And because my Lich can overlap with my regular character, I have increased armor and I have increased spell absorption to the point that I think I'm close to 100% spell absorption. I think it's like 90. Sorry about that. So you see here that this procs naturally. I have a flame cloak with those ice sickles at the bottom of my character. I can pick people up as a Lich. I can throw them. It's rather fun. I'll just toss him off the cliff here. And you'll see that that probably won't survive that fall. Not saying that this stuff isn't possible in Elden Ring. Perhaps, you know, people could end up putting it eventually into the game. I thought there was some mages up here where I could show an example of spell absorption, but maybe there's not. And as far as lore-wise, Elder Scrolls has too many aspects of lore to it for Elden Ring to really compete with it in terms of lore. And that plays a role into having a mod such like the More Interesting NPCs mod, where you actually put in 200 extra NPCs with thousands of lines of dialogue. That's very hard to do in Elden Ring. There's not really enough lore there. Maybe there is now that people have been studying the lore for a year and have 1 hour long videos about the lore, where a lot of it is conjecture or theorem based off of what they see carved into the walls, and a lot of it is accurate. A lot of them aren't wrong, or at least they make really good or interesting points, but you'd have to build the game from ground up to do that. So with some of those, I'm not saying that there's not things that Elden Ring isn't better at. Combat is better in Elden Ring, especially when you go vanilla Skyrim versus vanilla Elden Ring. There is a lot that Elden Ring does better. As far as destruction type spells, that's a lot better in Elden Ring. Combat is a lot better in Elden Ring. Ashes of War, to me, are comparable to Shouts, and Ashes of War are cool, and you could almost even give the nod to the Ashes of War at this point, but it's not to say that you can't do a lot with Shouts. But Ashes of War probably have more variations and more possibilities. As you see an example of me just having a storm gradually pick people off with lightning from the sky. So, that's just some of my few opinions of it. Between faction joining, between things like illusion, things like the economy of the world, you know, can we say less is more? I don't particularly think less is more. I particularly think more is more. You don't really feel like you're living in that world of the lands between. At least I don't. You know, I can't swim, I can't buy a house, I don't have anybody to talk to, I don't have any factions I can join, I don't have any reasonable economy of buying and selling things. So I'm kind of repeating myself here, but that's just a little bit of my input in it, you know, as far as things of like being able to morph and having that be a thing. There's a lot that I think Skyrim is superior at. But it's all conjecturized opinion. PvP might be arguably better in Elden Ring. I haven't really tried the multiplayer mods for Skyrim to know. But when I was playing Elden Ring, I know that when I went into PvP areas, I'd love to do invasions, but that became a lot of people running to the fog doors, the fog gates, just to avoid me. Or I'd get disconnected from a world, or they'd rush toward the door to get me out of their world, or they'd all be spamming Moonblade and Rivers of Blood. And that was one of my... I like to do invasions, but it just became repetitive after a while. So, there you go. There's a little bit of my 2 cents. I know it might not be the most popular opinion, but that's a few of my arguments for why I think Skyrim is a better game than Elden Ring, and will continue to be even as time goes on. And I will play the DLCs of Elden Ring when it comes out. I do think it's one of the better open world RPGs. I do. I just don't think it's the best open world RPG ever made. I don't think it's the best game ever made. I think that's rather silly in my opinion. So that's just a little bit of my 2 cents. Thanks for stopping by, and have a good one.